Karoline Leavitt exposes Jim Jordan's hidden agenda. Congress erupts. Karoline Leavitt walked into the Oversight Committee hearing room 5 minutes late, not because she was unprepared, but because she was waiting for the room to settle into its usual rhythm. The chair had just finished introducing Congressman Jim Jordan, and he was already smiling into the microphone like he was auditioning for a highlight reel. Cameras were rolling. The gallery was full. Reporters were halfway through writing their headlines. Jordan defends oversight authority. Again. Nobody noticed a red folder in Karoline's hand. Not yet. Jordan didn't look up when she took her seat. He barely acknowledged her at all. That was normal. At 26 years old, Karoline was often dismissed before she even opened her mouth. Some called her the intern with a seat. Others whispered that she was only there because the party needed young faces on camera. But Karoline didn't care about whispers. She cared about what was in that folder. And so, when it was finally her turn to speak, she didn't clear her throat or ask for permission. She simply placed the red folder on the desk. Firm, loud enough to be heard across the dais, loud enough to change the temperature of the room. "Mr. Chairman," she began, her voice calm but laced with purpose. "Before I ask my question, I'd like to submit new evidence to committee. It's relevant to Congressman Jordan's testimony." Jordan blinked, then smiled. "Evidence of what exactly?" he asked, leaning back, clearly amused. Karoline didn't smile. She flipped open the folder. "Well, I'm about to reveal," she said, locking eyes with him. "This room isn't ready for." The cameras caught Jordan's face just before it changed. He was expecting debate. He was expecting fiery rhetoric, some rehearsed lines about integrity and institutions. What he wasn't expecting was documentation, a paper trail, a challenge not to his ideas, but to his honesty. Across the room, aides shifted in their seats. Aides always knew before the members did. They could smell when something was off. And what Karoline was about to do smelled like smoke. "The evidence I'm submitting today includes internal communications, donor meeting transcripts, and audio recordings," she said, "all of which directly contradict statements made by Congressman Jordan in this chamber and in public over the last year." Now the silence was thick. Jordan's aide, a man in a navy pinstripe suit, reached for his phone. "Congresswoman," the chair began cautiously, "you're making serious claims." Karoline nodded. "They are serious. So, is misleading the American people under oath?" Jordan finally sat up straight. His jaw tightened. "Let me be very clear," she continued, lifting the first document from the folder and holding it aloft. "This isn't a political attack. This is a betrayal by a man who used his seat on this committee to protect power, not truth." The room fell quiet again. Jordan opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. And across the country, people watching the live feed leaned forward, because for the first time in a long time, it looked like someone wasn't playing politics. They were dropping the match, and the fire was just beginning. Jim Jordan wasn't used to silence. He was a man who built his political brand on noise, on shouting down opposition, on turning every hearing into a wrestling match of rhetoric. He was the kind of congressman who never waited to be called on. He spoke into microphones as if the entire room belonged to him, and for years it had. Jordan was a founding member of the House Freedom Caucus, a conservative pit bull with a sharp tongue and relentless energy. He called himself a watchdog for government accountability, but his critics had another name for him: the gatekeeper. Not of truth, but of distraction. He didn't answer questions. He redirected them. He didn't investigate abuses of power. He decided which powers were worth exposing. And somehow, in the chaos of the modern GOP, Jim Jordan had become untouchable. He'd weathered storms before: ethics inquiries, witnesses, whispers about what he had known during his time as a wrestling coach at Ohio State. But nothing stuck. Not really. He knew how to dodge. He knew how to shout loud enough to drown out the slow, quiet voice of accountability. Until today. Karoline Leavitt had barely spoken 5 sentences, and yet something had already shifted in the room. The air felt heavier. The folder wasn't just a prop. It was a threat. Not rhetorical. Not political. Legal. documentary, permanent, and that terrified Jordan in a way few things had. The chair tried to steer the moment back toward order. Congresswoman Leavitt, we'll review your materials after the hearing, as per protocol. But Karoline was ready. With all due respect, Mr. Chairman, I'm not here for protocol. I'm here for transparency. Jordan chuckled dryly into his mic. Transparency? From a freshman? You've barely been here long enough to learn where the bathroom is. A few low laughs from the Republican side of the room. That was his strategy, belittle and bulldoze. Karoline didn't flinch. Congressman, she said, you've been in this chamber for 16 years. That's long enough to learn how to cover your tracks. Unfortunately for you, I learned how to uncover them. Jordan leaned forward. His grin had vanished. Across the committee table, eyes flicked between the two, some out of curiosity, some out of dread. Karoline pulled out the second sheet of paper. Let's start with this email, sent from your office on March 8th of this year. The subject line reads, Media Coordination Strategy. The body reads, our messaging should continue focusing on weaponization government, but we must avoid drawing attention to GOP-aligned groups under current investigation. Delay subpoena response requests where applicable. Utilize PR distractions, preferably involving liberal members, to create narrative control. She paused and looked around. This was sent to 5 senior staffers, 2 of whom now work for Fox News as contributors. Jordan immediately shook his head. That's fabricated. It's not, she replied. It's part of a whistleblower packet submitted to my office 3 weeks ago, accompanied by login credentials, timestamp data, and matching metadata from your official congressional account. Now, the room wasn't just silent. It was still, the kind of stillness that only comes when someone hears something they cannot unhear. Jordan's voice dropped half an octave. Congresswoman, I suggest you consider the consequences of slander. This isn't slander, she cut in. It's sourcing. There's a difference. She placed an email on the desk for the clerk to collect. And that's just the beginning. Jordan turned to the chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that we recess for a 10-minute review of these so-called documents. You'll have time to respond, the chairman said. But Congresswoman Leavitt has the floor. Karoline nodded and continued. For years, Congressman Jordan has positioned himself as a defender of justice, a man obsessed with oversight. But what he's really done is weaponize selective investigation. He pursues oversight only when it's politically convenient. He demands transparency only when it hurts his opponents. And when it comes to his own conduct, he hides behind distractions and deflections. Jordan finally raised his voice. You don't know the first thing about how this body works. I know enough to recognize corruption when I see it, she said. And the American people are tired of hearing loud voices that say nothing while covering up everything. She pulled out another document. This one was thicker, several pages. This is a transcript from a closed-door strategy meeting held at the Heritage Hill Club in Virginia, March 22nd. Congressman Jordan was present, along with media strategists and donor representatives from 3 political action committees. In this meeting, Congressman Jordan discussed plans to introduce legislation aimed at shielding certain corporate entities from congressional subpoenas under guise of anti-woke corporate protection. Jordan slammed his hand on the table. This is a lie. Karoline calmly turned to the camera. I'll remind my colleague that making knowingly false statements during a congressional hearing is a violation of federal statute, she said. Everything I'm presenting has already been verified by third-party forensic analysts. Reporters in the gallery started typing faster. Phones lit up. One aide slipped out the side door with a phone to his ear. Karoline turned back to Jordan. You've told the public that you're fighting for transparency, but in private, you're coordinating media manipulation strategies, suppressing oversight, and using your office to protect powerful friends. Jordan tried to regain control. None of this is real. These are fabricated documents, made to smear. Then you won't mind if we enter them into the official congressional record, she said, and subpoena the attendees from the Heritage Hill Club. Jordan hesitated. That hesitation said more than any rebuttal. Karoline leaned in slightly. Not smug, not theatrical, just precise. You've spent your career asking questions, Congressman. But today, you're the one who needs to answer. And for the first time in his political life, Jim Jordan had no idea what to say. Jim Jordan sat frozen. The red folder was still there, still open, but now it was more than just a collection of papers. It was an indictment of everything he'd built his image on. Karoline didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to wave documents in the air or point fingers. Her calm was more unsettling than outrage. She looked like someone who already knew how this would end. "Let's talk about your public statements," she said, flipping to a new page. "You've said on multiple occasions that you're fighting for the American people, that you believe in government transparency, that you support full access to congressional investigations, no matter the target." She looked up at Jordan. "Those were your words, repeated across dozens of interviews. But your actions, your documented actions, tell a different story." She turned toward the committee. In private strategy sessions, Congressman Jordan repeatedly advocated for withholding investigatory authority when it risked exposing financial impropriety tied to specific conservative media groups. And worse, he recommended prioritizing investigations not by severity or public interest, but by how well they would perform on cable news. Murmurs rippled across the room. "Here's a direct quote," she said, reading from a printed transcript. "Our goal isn't to investigate everything. It's to create the illusion of accountability, enough to keep the base engaged and the press distracted. We don't win by solving problems. We win by owning the optics." She let the quote hang in the air. The committee chair looked visibly unsettled. A Republican aide scribbled something on a legal pad and passed it forward. Jordan finally leaned forward again. "You're reading from a fake transcript. That quote never happened." Karoline looked right at him. "Are you absolutely sure?" He hesitated, just for a second, and in that second, everything shifted, because he wasn't sure. Not anymore. Not after the email. Not after the meeting notes. Not after the documents he didn't know she had. "I'm not responding to unverifiable material," he snapped. "This is a stunt." "No, Congressman," she replied. "This is a mirror." She reached back into the folder and pulled out a small USB drive. "And if you're concerned about verification, you'll be glad to know this next piece of evidence has been authenticated by 3 independent digital forensic firms, including one contracted by your own party last year." Jordan's eyes locked on the drive. "I'd like to request the committee play the following 38-second clip," she said, handing the drive to the clerk. "It's from an off-the-record roundtable in February, hosted by the Liberty Strategy Group. Congressman Jordan was in attendance, so we're at least 4 registered lobbyists." The chairman hesitated. "Congresswoman, are you confirming this audio is of a sitting member of Congress?" "I am." "Has the member been made aware of its content?" "He will be now." The chairman nodded. The clerk inserted the drive. And then from the speakers came Jim Jordan's voice, clear, unmistakable, and devastating. "You don't need truth to win. You need repetition. If people hear enough, they believe it. That's how we control the narrative. The base doesn't need transparency. They need confidence. And that's what we sell." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Not even Jordan. Karoline let the moment settle. She didn't gloat. She didn't blink. Then she asked the only question that mattered. "Congressman Jordan, is that your voice?" The recording had stopped playing, but its words echoed like thunder inside the hearing chamber. "The base doesn't need transparency. They need confidence. And that's what we sell." That line didn't just land. It detonated. You could feel it in the gallery, in the way reporters glanced at each other, in the way even some of Jordan's colleagues looked down, suddenly unsure of where to place their loyalty. Karoline remained still. "Congressman," she repeated, "is that your voice on recording?" Jordan cleared his throat. "It's out of context." "That's not a denial," she said calmly. And that wasn't an answer. He shifted in his seat. "If you had any integrity, you would have come to me before blindsiding me with manipulated recordings in a public hearing." Karoline didn't flinch. "If you had any integrity, Congressman, there wouldn't be recordings." The audience in the back rows gasped quietly, not because she raised her voice, but because she didn't have to. Jordan turned toward the chairman. I object to this line of questioning. This isn't procedure, it's an ambush. The chairman replied, You'll have time to respond in full, but the evidence stands. Karoline took the cue. She lifted another sheet of paper from the folder, this one with highlighted lines and annotated footnotes. This isn't just about words. It's about patterns. In the last 6 months, Congressman Jordan has publicly stated he supports independent oversight and full transparency. But behind the scenes, through emails, memos, donor transcripts, and verified audio, he's shown a consistent intent to obstruct investigations and manipulate public opinion through false urgency and fabricated targets. She held the paper forward so cameras could zoom in. According to campaign finance filings, Jordan received over $1.3 million in bundled contributions from shell PACs affiliated with Liberty Strategy Group, the same group that hosted the off-record event you just heard. Jordan leaned forward. That money was disclosed. Those groups are legal. Yes, Karoline replied. But what's not legal is knowingly coordinating messaging strategy with unregistered lobbying groups while chairing a government oversight committee. She placed the final document on the table. And what's unethical is presenting yourself as a crusader for truth, while you privately refer to your voters as a base to be managed, not represented. Jordan tried to respond, but the weight of the silence was louder than any defense he could summon. Karoline looked at him. No triumph, no condescension, just clarity. You didn't just lie to Congress, she said. You lied to the people who trusted you to tell them the truth. And for the first time in his career, Jim Jordan didn't talk over it. He just sat there, staring down at the table, as if the wood itself might offer a way out. Karoline reached into the folder one last time and pulled out a signed agreement, dated, notarized, and on official letterhead. Congressman Jordan, she said softly, is this your signature authorizing coordinated disinformation with Liberty Strategy Group? Jordan's eyes dropped. The room, again, fell completely silent. Jordan stared at the document, but said nothing. The signature was unmistakable. His name, his pen stroke, his seal. Across the aisle, even his Republican colleagues shifted uncomfortably. No one moved to object. No one rose to his defense. Karoline looked directly at the cameras. This isn't about partisanship. It's about principle. If we don't hold our own accountable, then oversight means nothing. The chairman slowly nodded. The document will be entered into the record. Outside the chamber, reporters were already scrambling. Inside, Jim Jordan looked smaller than he ever had, drowned by the silence of his own party. Jordan stood slowly, gathering his papers with trembling hands. He didn't look at Karoline. He didn't look at anyone. Without a word, he walked out of the chamber, leaving behind his seat his power and the myth he'd built for years. No applause, just the truth. As the doors closed behind Jim Jordan, Karoline turned back to the microphone. Let this be a message. Power doesn't protect you from the truth. Proof does. Across the country, the moment went viral. Hashtags trended. Headlines exploded. But more than that, trust began to shift. Karoline Leavitt wasn't just the youngest voice in Congress that day. She became the most fearless. And from that moment on, a new phrase echoed in political circles. Check your file before Karoline finds it, because accountability had a new name, and Congress would never be the same.